In many ways, this could be an historic day in this chamber. Let me tell you what has happened in the last couple of years that makes that a reality. In the past, there has been forms of this type of bill before this body, and they have been narrowly defeated. In the past, there's always been the question, well, how bad is this secondhand smoke? Yeah, it irritates me. In fact, there were lots of stories about fellow senators as recently as 10 or 12 years ago in this very chamber, in your executive sessions and so on, operating in smoke-filled rooms. Last June, the Surgeon General report, and let me remind you, this is a Surgeon General appointed by a conservative Republican president. He is a career person who is an admiral in the United States Navy. The Surgeon General's report said the evidence is now massive and conclusive. And you're going to hear that from me several times today. Massive and conclusive. That secondhand smoke causes serious diseases, including lung cancer, heart disease, respiratory illnesses. Plainly, secondhand smoke is a killer. The Surgeon General estimates that it is responsible for killing nearly 40,000 people in the U.S. every year. Now, what happened 2 years ago? I think the vote failed by about 2. And as we were breaking up that day, I remember someone saying, I guess it's up to the cities and other municipalities to see whether they want to pass this. Well, Lincoln and Omaha went right to work and passed city ordinances. The Lincoln City Ordinance, and this is the ordinance after which this bill is patterned, is quite a strict bill. The Omaha ordinance is one where many exceptions were made in a patchwork-like fashion in order to get their ordinance with the support of the councilmen that was needed. Now, the real question and the opposition that we will hear to this today is that we will be told to ignore the Surgeon General's report. It really doesn't count, and my First Amendment rights or Second Amendment rights, and we'll hear quotations by Thomas Jefferson, etc., about this. And if you go out in the lobby, there will be people out there handing out flags for people to wave, telling us about our individual rights. How important are these individual rights? Don't employees, and there are some 60,000 of these employees in the bars and restaurants and such in the state of Nebraska, have any rights? Well, let me tell you a little something about my family. My grandfather and father came over from Sweden to the land of opportunity, the free United States, do what they could do. What did they do? They went to work in the coal mines. They didn't have to go to the coal mines, of course, but then what else might they have done? They had to work, they had to support themselves. You know, 100 years ago, the coal mines of Pennsylvania didn't have very good laws about safety. Even now, with good laws about safety, there's still accidents there. You can imagine what it was 100 years ago. Well, the government did step in to working places and made the coal mines safer. Every worker has the right to a safe workplace. And if you want to say that they can work somewhere else, sure they can. That college student, he can work somewhere else. So can that working mother. Speaking of working mothers, if you are a cocktail waitress and you, over your 8 hours, are working in one of these smoke-filled places, she goes home having smoked the equivalent of 2 packs of cigarettes while she was at work. She will have done the equivalent of smoked 2 packs of cigarettes while at work. A couple other things. This last fall, I had the pleasure one day of sitting next to the Minister of Health from Scotland. And this was a talk about, or a conference about, ways to provide good health care cheaply. And I said, basically, you know, whether you're a socialist type of country or one like ours, the problem is that cost has gone out of sight. What are the most important things that you have found? And he said, oh, that's easy. Pass the best public health measures you can find. I challenge this body to tell me where there is a better public health measure than this that we can find. In the last 100 years, here's a couple of the things that were public health measures. Clean water hasn't always been here in our city water supplies. It came in the 1920s. Vaccinations basically came into being in the 1960s, particularly with polio. I personally think, and I would challenge anyone to come up with something that has the potential for greater public health improvement in the last 40 years than what we are trying to establish here today. What will improve the health of all Nebraskans more than this measure? And we do it free. Speaking of free, last year this session of the legislature put together a commission to study Medicaid.
1 minute.
And find out how best to curb our expenses in this area. If we don't accept this challenge for this major free initiative that will cut down on our costs, then I think the rest is like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. What we're going to talk about here this morning, however, is comparing what Lincoln did, which basically ended up with a town versus town situation, and Omaha, where a business versus business. Grand Island, Columbus, and Kearney, our 3 cities of Senator Stuthman and Aguilar, who are my colleagues in this, have shown a reluctance to do this on their own and believe that
Time.
we should do it statewide. Thank you, sir.
The amendment I've introduced is designed to keep foster children from being exposed to the dangers of secondhand smoke. This amendment is consistent with the language of the bill. The bill already prohibits smoking in child care facilities. This amendment would ensure that a young child's health is protected all day long. Children are particularly vulnerable to the effects of secondhand smoke because they are still developing physically, have higher breathing rates than adults, and have little control over their indoor environments. Children exposed to high doses of secondhand smoke, such as those whose parents or primary caregivers smoke, run the greatest risk of experiencing damaging health effects. And these include asthma in children who have not previously exhibited symptoms, increases in the risk for sudden infant death syndrome, increases in the risk for middle ear infection, and infants and children younger than 6 years old who are regularly exposed to secondhand smoke are at risk, an increased risk, I would say, of lower respiratory tract infections such as pneumonia and bronchitis. And I was interested to learn last night when I attended an event with the dentist that children that are in smoking homes have a much higher incidence of dental cavities and dental health problems. For children with asthma, exposure to secondhand smoke can trigger asthma attacks and make asthma symptoms much more severe. The American Lung Association's secondhand smoke fact sheet cites that secondhand smoke is especially harmful to young children. It is responsible for thousands of hospitalizations each year and even linked to sudden infant death syndrome, also known as SIDS. A November 2006 article in the USA Today summarized laws addressing the issue of secondhand smoke in children. The article reported that Vermont, Washington, and other states and counties already prohibit foster parents from smoking around children in their homes and cars. In addition, Arkansas and Louisiana passed laws in 2006 forbidding anyone from smoking in cars carrying young children. Courts are even ordering smoke-free environments in custody and visitation disputes. At least 6 states and some counties prohibit foster parents from smoking when foster children are present. Litigation and advocacy at the University of Maryland School in Law, and I quote, "There are times when it's appropriate to regulate what people can do in their home. In this instance, the state is responsible for that child. They are within their rights to ensure that child's health and safety." I've heard some people, some senators, express concerns about the rights of the smokers. But this is not about the smokers. The goal here is simply to protect children who cannot protect themselves. The bill offers many provisions to protect the general public from the dangers of secondhand smoke, even some that primarily affect the health of adults. And yet we are unwilling to settle for a healthy quality of air for children who are wards of the state of Nebraska, whose care is entrusted to us. As a licensing agency for foster care homes, the state has an obligation to ensure that, to the extent possible, they are looking out for the health and the safety of these children who don't have a voice of their own in these matters. On behalf of the many children in foster care and child care settings whose health is affected each and every day by exposure to secondhand smoke, I urge your support for this amendment. I'd like to add that I have heard the argument from some that we'll lose foster homes. I spent the past 3-day weekend talking with case managers who work directly with children in foster care and with foster parents. Having firsthand knowledge of foster care, I was not surprised to learn that the number of foster parents who smoke is declining, but that those who smoke are such heavy smokers that the case managers will visit these children in schools or daycare centers to avoid being subjected to permeating secondhand smoke. If adults are unwilling to go into an environment that is recognized to be dangerous, how can we justify the placement of children who are legal wards of the state of Nebraska in these environments. By Senator Johnson's own calculations, within a 24-hour period, these foster children are subjected to the equivalent of smoking 6 cigarettes. I ask your support of this amendment. Thank you.
Recognized to address AM 333.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My fellow colleagues, I am rising today in opposition to this ban, and I want you to know the personal history that still drives me to oppose it. I am a cancer survivor. 11 years ago, I was diagnosed with bladder cancer. I smoked from the time I was approximately 15 until I was 25. When I was 39, I woke up and urinated blood. Since then, I have undergone 10 years of treatment, which I think Dr. Johnson would tell you cystoscopies are anything but pleasant. I doubt there is anyone on this floor that despises cigarette smoking more than I do personally. They have taken much from me individually and even more from other members of my family who they've taken their lives. Nevertheless, I rise in opposition to this bill because I believe it is poorly drafted. For example, a bill that takes away substantial liberties should be carefully written. This bill does that. Whether we think it is in their best interest or not, liberty allows people to be stupid sometimes. If you look at page 5, section 14, public place means an indoor area in which the public is invited or in which the pubic is permitted. Now, if we are going to do these kinds of things, let us please do them carefully. In addition to this bill has another number of concerns, not the least of which, if you look at section 21 on page 7, this permits warrantless searches of any place of employment in the state of Nebraska. I submit to you this is unconstitutional. I submit to you that even if the courts were to uphold it, and they might, it is fundamentally contrary to the principles of liberty that have long controlled our people's behavior, whether or not it seems to control our courts' decisions. Let me give you an example. I have a client desperately unhappy, about to be indicted for a crime. They're melting down. They're in the back conference room. They light up a cigarette to try to collect their thoughts. The police or the health inspectors can kick the door down.
19 A's, 17 A's on the amendment, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. The amendment is not adopted.
I guess I had questions on it. He said that this was a narrow exception for a narrow group. Senator Johnson, would you yield to questions, please?
Senator Johnson, would you yield to a question from Senator Fisher?
Mr. President, be happy to.
Under Section 16, Senator Johnson, could you explain that a little better? I guess I'm confused by the word only. Tobacco retail outlet means a retail store that sells only tobacco and related products, and in which the sale of other products is only incidental. I don't see the connection with the only and the other on that.
Well, Senator Fisher, we did have a similar discussion with Senator Shimmick here about an hour ago, I guess. And at that time, what we said was this, is that it is meant that these would be smoke shops only, where a person goes in, tries out the tobacco, and see if he likes that one and buys it. The other incidental products was meant to be things like ashtrays and so on, but when you said incidental, it does not mean that you would set up a bar or this type of thing with it.
Could this retail outlet, when you're talking about other products, can they sell candy bars and chips and snacks?
And again, this was mentioned in my conversation.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
But no, it is not meant so that a father, grandfather, or whomever brings his children in and exposes them to the smoke. This would be just the tobacco-related products.
Do you think that's clear, since Senator Shimmick and I both had questions on it. And I do apologize for
No, it's perfectly fine.
following that. Earlier I was off the floor, as you can imagine.
Sure, no problem at all.
We have Senator Avery, McDonald, Aguilar. Senator Avery, you're recognized to speak to Floor Amendment 19.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm probably the only person in this body who can say what I'm about to say. My grandfather was a tobacco farmer in North Carolina. All of the people in my family smoked. My aunts, my uncles, my cousins. 2 people in my family did not smoke, my own parents. My father died at 88, my mother's still living at 87. But all my uncles and aunts and cousins are either dead or suffering from severe smoke-related health problems. But we all know the health problems that are associated with smoking, so I don't need to belabor that point. I want to speak really about something else, and it has to do with the freedom issue, freedom of choice. Our job in this body is to pass laws that promote the public good. Clean air is a public good. It is provided to everybody. It's available to everybody, no matter what their contribution might be to providing or to creating that public good. That's our job. That's our job. We have to provide public goods, things that are available to promote the public interest, and promoting public health is one of those. Now, smoking in public places creates an environment in which non-smokers become unwilling smokers. It's not their choice. They don't choose to smoke, but they have, because of passive smoke, they become unwilling smokers. This legislation is not taking away freedom. It is, in fact, restoring the freedom of non-smokers. And I might point out to you that non-smokers are the majority. So what we ought to be concerned about is protecting the majority and the freedom of non-smokers not to be exposed to passive smoke, not to become forced unwilling smokers because of some rights that we think we're protecting for smokers. I might add one more point. There is deep and broad public support for smoking bans here in Lincoln. We went through a 2-year process. In June of 2004, the Lincoln City Council passed a ban. It was almost immediately challenged by public petition. It was placed on the ballot in November of 2004, and 62% of the voters voted to support the smoking ban. I would suggest to you that if we pass this, you will find that a similar number of people around the state will agree with us. Thank you.
Several years ago, if you had brought this idea to the floor, I definitely would not have voted for it and hoped it wouldn't pass, because I truly felt that local control is where it needed to be. But we've had issues of local control when it comes to tobacco regulation in our cities. They have taken it upon themselves to do local control. Lincoln has done local control. I've never smoked a cigarette in my whole life. Hated smoke. My father was a tobacco smoker, and I vowed that I would never have tobacco, and my husband would never smoke either. So, and none of my children smoke. We do not like smoke. The problem is that it's an infringement on the majority, because the majority of people in the state of Nebraska don't smoke. 20% smoke, but yet we're passing laws to say that those 20% have more rights than those that don't smoke. And getting back to the local control issue, we passed concealed carry last year. We passed a bill that was statewide. The states now, or the cities now, are doing local control, banning it in their communities. But yet we have a bill that comes back and says, oh no, we don't like the local control. We want statewide again. So I don't see these as irrelevant at all, because one, we have the local control in the guns, but now we want state, and this we don't want state, we want local control. To me, those issues don't match at all. we're looking at two different things. When you go into a bar and there's smoke there, I don't care if I'm smoking or you're smoking, I come out of there smoking. My clothes smell like smoke, my hair smells like smoke, I'm sure my lungs smell like smoke, because I am breathing the smoke that's there. Secondhand smoke is an issue. If you're eating fattening foods and I want to get fat, that's my problem. If I go on a gym floor and fall and hurt my knee, that's my problem. I'm not inflecting or reflecting anything on you. It's a personal opinion and a personal problem that I do myself. But when you smoke, you're infringing on the rights of others. And I think we seriously need to look at that. Local control is one thing, but we need to make sure we're consistent in our thoughts, and we're not. Thank you.
One of the best things I was going to say, and they said it very well. Thank them for their comments. Very, very germane to the conversation that we're having here. The majority of Nebraskans don't smoke. What about their personal choice? People are getting up and talking about personal choice. What about their personal choice? Shouldn't they be allowed to choose to walk in any restaurant in the state and not have to breathe somebody else's cigarette smoke? I think they should. I think they have that right. Why are we catering to the minority? Probably 20% or less of the people that we're really concerned about here. Somehow that bothers me. It just doesn't seem quite the democratic thing to do. I do want to talk about the tons of email that I've got from people applauding me for bringing this issue forward. Applauding me. Because they're offended by it just as much as I am. I will speak specifically to one letter because it really carried a lot of weight for me. A gentleman who I'll say is a constituent of mine wrote me a letter. Told me that all his life he was a heavy smoker. His wife didn't smoke. His wife passed away of secondhand smoke-related diseases. His comment at that point was very much directed to the point. He asked why we didn't do this 20 years ago. Can you imagine the number of lives that would have been saved? People would still be alive today if we would have done this 20 years ago. I chuckle when I hear somebody mention something about, what about the revenue we're going to lose? I say let's lose it, because I guarantee you that number would pale in amount to what we spend on smoking-related diseases in the state of Nebraska alone. That's the reality of the situation. I don't know why the opponents won't speak to that issue. I think it's an important part of the conversation. We have a responsibility of legislators to curb Medicaid spending. This is the best way to do it that I know how.
I guess what I want to say is if we're going to have a statewide smoking ban, but now we're going to start taking these parts out of it, I think we're getting back to the freedom that people have in their own homes, in their own businesses. I own a business that is a meat market, and we smoke meats. Now, are those the same as cigarettes? No, but the place smells like smoke. Most people think it smells good. Not everyone, of course. My point being, my business has been my home for most of the last 17 years. I've put my blood, sweat, and tears into my business, and I've put more money in my business than my home. And my wife cringes at that, but that's what you have to do when you own a business. Then for the state to come in and tell me who can and cannot do what in my business is just like telling me what I can and cannot do in my home. And I think that is where we draw the line. We cannot have smoking in public buildings such as this one. Fine. We can't have it in any other buildings, public owned. Fine. But when it's privately owned, and I have put my time, my life, and my expense into it, Who are we to come in and tell me what can and cannot be done in my business? I think the issue here is many small towns around my district and the state,
1 minute.
thank you, that are going to have a real problem with this sort of legislation. Some of these towns in my district have one building in town, and it's the bar, it's the coffee shop, it's the diner, it's the community hall, it's the card playing place. It's where everybody goes. And it's privately owned. Mr. Dickey in Swanton works a lot of hours there to put money back in to keep his business going for his community. And we should not step on his rights to let them do in there what they want that is legal. I don't think they can come in and smoke a joint in his business, but if they want to have a cigarette, they should be able to while it is still legal in this state. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I will have to disagree with those. The people, on the whole, the majority of the people that I've heard from have been against this bill. And it's because they feel that they should be left, have the ability to make those decisions on a local level instead of having senators who come down to Lincoln and sit in the legislature make those decisions for what's going to happen in their city for them. As I said earlier, we've seen that, Lincoln and Omaha have made the decision. We hear that some cities, the people aren't, the city council's not going to do it. The businesses are afraid to do it. Why are they afraid to do it? Could it be because the citizens in that community don't want a smoking ban? And if the citizens in that community do want a smoking ban, then I submit to you that those citizens are the ones that need to make that choice, not 49 of us sitting in this chamber in Lincoln. Cities have the ability to have a smoking ban now. The city council can pass a smoking ban, as they did in Omaha. The citizens in a community can petition and have a smoking ban in their city, as they did here in Lincoln. Cities have that ability. Last session when we passed the concealed carry in this chamber, we left an option in there that cities could determine what they wanted to do with that bill. We left that option there that local people, whether it's in Lincoln, Omaha, Kearney, Valentine, Broken Bow, wherever in this state, can make that decision on if they want to allow concealed carry within their corporate limits. But now, in my opinion, we've just done a flip-flop with this bill. Because we said, no, cities, you're not going to make the decision on this one because a few of you have come and said, gee, you can't make it. You're afraid to make it. We want the state to mandate it. We didn't think that way last session on concealed carry. Senator Stuthman and I have a bill going through this body right now. It's on select file. It deals with ATVs, all-terrain vehicles. We're giving cities the power to make decisions on ATVs within their corporate limits. We're taking that away from the state. We're changing state law with that bill. And we're giving that authority to cities. I guess you can make the argument that ATVs might not be healthy for you, too. You can make the argument that guns aren't helpful for you. You can make the argument that concealed carry will harm somebody else. You can make the argument that ATVs can harm somebody else. But yet we have turned that authority over to cities. I don't see them running to the legislature. I haven't gotten calls on this saying, oh, gee, don't let us make the decision on concealed carry. We want to abide by what you guys passed last session. I haven't seen that. But yet, we're doing a flip-flop on this, folks. We're saying, okay, the state's going to mandate it this time because for one reason or another, from whatever perspective you're coming from on this, from whatever you've heard
1 minute.
from constituents, from whatever you've heard from business people who want to level that playing field, whatever you've heard from them, gee, all of a sudden a state mandate is great on this. It is great on this. I disagree. This is not great. This is in conflict of what we've done before, and we can make arguments all we want on the health aspects, but I go back to a basic focus and a basic philosophy. We don't need the state to make this mandate. The power is there for our local communities to do it now. Thank you.
This is the first time I've spoken on this bill. One of the things that really concerns me is hearing the debate this morning, and people say, you know, we shouldn't be getting involved with the state shouldn't be trying to tell everybody what they can do and what they can't do. And I will agree with that in a part. Some comments were made, you know, that we should be in control of the ice skaters. We should be in control of other things. But there's one thing that I think that we are really missing in this discussion is the fact that tobacco is truly a legal product. People can smoke the tobacco products. The issue that we're dealing with is the particles that happen after the individual inhales the smoke through a filter, I might add, and then he exhales the smoke. Where does this smoke go? It goes right into the lungs of the individual sitting aside of him at the bar. Now they say maybe we should have some control on the alcohol. The individual sitting aside of me is probably drinking straight peppermint schnapps, I will say. But his exhaling that alcohol, will that make me drunk? Or will it have an effect on my health? No, I don't think so. I don't want to, you know, I will not have any of that secondhand alcohol. Anyway, I would hope not to. But the smoke is a part that it is a person's right to smoke. And I'll totally agree with you there. But keep the smoke to yourself, if that is possible. I think that's the issue that we're dealing with. Allow the people to smoke if they want to, but if a person doesn't want to inhale that smoke, I think it should be that person's right, you know, that he shouldn't have to inhale that smoke because it's a secondhand smoke, and there are dangers of secondhand smoke. That is a very, very much of a concern of mine. I think there are other issues. You know, when you look at what we talk about of regulations, I'm in the livestock industry. We have regulations out there. We have regulations as far as confinement livestock, where these confinement buildings can be located, because there are odors to them. Some people think they're offensive, others don't. There are issues with ethanol plants, with the odor from ethanol plants, you know, where they can be located around the neighborhoods. In the livestock industry, we have setbacks. You can't put those places right aside of somebody's home, so they could get the effects of that odor. Well, in my opinion, what is smoke? Smoke is an odor. Maybe there should be setbacks as far as where you can smoke. You got to set yourself back 40 feet from somebody else. It'd be the only place that you can smoke. Maybe we don't want to go that far.
1 minute.
So those are some of the current concerns that I have. You know, it is the product that's inhaled and it's exhaled for the next person to inhale, but he doesn't want to inhale that. And I think we should protect the air The Clean Indoor Act, we should protect that. I did get some emails from many, many people, and I'd like to read you one of them. And this was from a good friend of mine. I'm very much in favor of LB 395. I agree that smokers have the right to smoke, but their smoke should not have to affect me and my family. My dad died of lung cancer, but he was a smoker, and he was a smoker his entire life. He also never smoked in our house or in our cars. I wish all smokers would have the same courtesy, but they don't. Me and my family have chosen to spend weekends in Lincoln rather than Omaha because of the smoker ban in Lincoln.
There are, in fact, competing interests at play here. For example, we've heard a lot about personal freedom. We've also heard about economic development and free market concepts. We've also heard a lot about local control. These are all principles that I believe very strongly in. One interesting aspect of the debate this morning I find is it's quite refreshing to hear so many senators visit about their concern for workers' rights, health, and safety. And I hope to see a continuation of that concern as we address many other proposals as we move forward into this session. I also think that it's a little bit inconsistent to be willing to receive revenues and balance the budget on the backs of people engaged in illegal activity, but then further regulate their personal choices. Here in Lincoln, we have a smoking ban. It's worked to a certain extent to improve air quality and otherwise, but there's been significant economic impacts, particularly in my district in North Lincoln. Many bar owners in Havelock are struggling with this. A recent report from the University of Nebraska shows that in Lincoln, bars are losing over $170,000 a month. And that's a significant impact. There's no question about it. The other $1,000 a month. And that's a significant impact. There's no question about it. The other things that I wanted to point out in this discussion is that I think LB 395 is poorly crafted and provides really expansive powers to government to enter into businesses that were previously unavailable to them. What is reasonable? A health director or law enforcement officer may inspect a place of employment or public place at any reasonable time. That's not defined any further. And that's a broad expansion of power for our government. In addition, the posting requirements that require a no smoking sign to be placed at every place of employment at every entrance. So we're saying to the farmers who have 2 ranch hands with them, every mud porch, every Quonset hut, every dairy barn, every entrance needs to have that sign posted. And I think that, again, is troublesome. I think we've had a really good debate this morning. I'm looking forward to hearing more about these issues. With that.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the legislature. This whole bill, I'm talking off the mic and off to the side with folks, given occasions all morning, and they're saying, well, how come you haven't, where do you stand on this? How come you haven't spoken about it or anything else? I'm not sure I'm going to be able to provide anything valuable here. You know, if we had a bicameral, we probably could deal with this issue a little more effectively. I'm just kidding. That was a bad joke. Mr. Clerk, relax. That was a joke. I had to waste about a minute of time. Look, I don't want to waste anybody's time. I think the bottom line for me is the underlying bill, FA21, FA15. Obviously, those need to be attached to LB 395, but the underlying bill tastes a little bit funny. I think strange. It reminds me. My daughter was about 6 years old, and she came home from school and said, Daddy, I have a joke for you. And she claims she doesn't remember this, but I remember it like it was yesterday. She's 13 now. She said, what did one lion say to the other lion when they were eating the clown? And I said, where did she hear this joke? I'm thinking a 6-year-old telling me that 2 lions are eating a clown. And I said, Megan, I don't know. And she said, do this taste funny? I thought it was funny. I mean, when a 6-year-old telling you a joke like then of course I started thinking, I got to find out where she heard the joke. Well, whatever. This bill tastes funny, and it tastes funny because there are exemptions provided. It tastes funny because there are exemptions provided in it. And I'm not trying to make light of this and be trite. There are exemptions provided that just shouldn't be provided. I actually kicked around an idea of providing an amendment, and I've spoken seriously about this in the past, about providing an amendment that would create a ban for smoking inside of a person's house, too. Why not? Senator Karpyshek brought it up earlier. If this is bad for our health, why are we letting anybody do it? Maybe it should be a controlled substance. Maybe we should, I even thought about treating it like alcohol, and to the degree that we manage and mandate and regulate and monitor alcohol consumption in the state, distribution, the whole bit. You need to purchase a license in order to do that in this state. You can't just start distributing alcohol. Maybe some of these, maybe you handle it in that manner. I don't think there's much creativity to LB 395. That's not my problem with it. It's the exemptions that it provides. I'd leave you with this. I think we have to use great care when we compare smoking to alcohol use. It's been brought up quite a bit on the floor today and in the past 4 years that I've been here. I would submit to you that the peripheral effects of alcohol use and alcohol abuse have not just killed thousands upon thousands like secondhand smoke have. They have affected and killed millions. We need to be, forgive me, members of the legislature, we need to be real careful about the analogy, alcohol and secondhand smoke. You can't compare. It's very difficult to make that comparison. How many of us know somebody that have died or been abused, have died from alcohol abuse or been abused by alcoholic people? We all do. We all know that. Alcohol is a scourge. Secondhand smoke is a huge problem. There's a difference between a scourge and a huge problem. I've mentioned this before. I had 2 grandfathers die. They didn't die of secondhand smoking. They didn't die of smoking. They didn't have time. Their livers lodged into some skewed ball from alcohol poisoning, alcoholism. That's what they died from.
Time. Thank you, Senator Friend.
Just a couple of things, and then we're about done for the day. I want to send you home with a few things. Senator Friend, unfortunately, you're not quite correct, and I'll find the exact numbers for you. But the people that die every year from secondhand smoke, the innocent victims, are about 40,000 a year. Every 18 months, we total the number of people killed in the Vietnam War. Every 18 months, secondhand smoke kills what we lost in the Vietnam War. I'll find the other numbers regarding alcohol. The difference here is alcohol, again, we do it to ourselves.
Has been said this morning. One of the arguments from one of the senators was kind of complaining because people are coming back and asking for a level playing field. I say, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with creating a level playing field and giving people the opportunity to increase their business? Isn't that what some of the arguments against this bill were about? people losing business. I support a level playing field and what this does. Another thing I like to comment on was something Senator White, I believe, said. He said we have the right to be stupid. I submit to you, no, we don't. You can't go into a crowded theater and yell fire. You can't go into a mall and start shooting off a gun. Those are just a couple of stupid things you can't do. And you shouldn't be stupid enough to cause medical harm to innocent people who don't want to smoke. Senator Karpyshek, I'm glad you're back on the floor. There's something I would really love to address with you. Would you respond to a question, please?
Senator Karpyshek, would you yield to a question from Senator Aguilar?
Yes, I would.
When you were referring to small towns, and small towns sometimes having only one community building where everybody congregates, by everybody congregating, does that mean children as well?
1 minute.
I suppose they do if they go to the bar.
Don't you think that's maybe helping our argument a little bit? When we're putting children in a situation because they have no place else to go in that small town, I submit to you, senators, that's all the more reason we need this bill. And that's all the more reason we need it in small towns as well as municipalities size of Lincoln, Omaha, Grand Island, Kearney, and Hastings. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, members. I would just like to respond to Senator Aguilar that gets back to our, maybe we need to have a permit to be parents. Maybe we should keep the kids out of the bar, but if they want to bring their kids there and they don't want smoke, then they should either buy the bar and ban smoking or ask the owner to ban smoking because it is his place of business. And with that, I would like to yield the rest of my time to Senator Erdman.
Thank you, Senator Karpyshek. Senator Erdman, 4 minutes.
Thank you, Senator Karpyshek. Members of the legislature, I intended to confine my remarks to the motion before us as our rules outline, and so in keeping with our fine rule, in Rule 2, Section 7, Senator Johnson, I'll be supporting your amendment before us. Just a few clarifications that weren't disclosed at the outset. The only reason that the League of Municipalities showed up in favor of this bill is because they wanted a provision to opt out of it. So when you see their listing, Senator Mines took them to task a little bit earlier, when you see their listing as a proponent, it was qualified with an amendment being adopted that would allow a city to vote to opt out of the statewide ban. And I don't have the transcript. I think that's accurate. I think other members can clarify that that's there, but that's one thing that needs to be clarified. Senator Stuthman pointed out that in other areas of law we have requirements. Generally, those requirements apply if you have them in place. Senator Stuthman comes from a county that has no zoning. So you're going to argue that we need setbacks. Well, that's a local decision. And in fact, their community has opted, or their county has opted to not have any zoning. That is 100% opposite of what this bill does. This bill doesn't give you that option. This bill doesn't give you, as we had this conversation, this bill doesn't give you the opportunity to show respect to one another. This is about imposing one group's will over another. I'm not in favor of that. I don't support the idea of letting non-smokers impose their will on smokers, and I don't support the idea of letting smokers impose their will. This bill doesn't give us another alternative to work those issues out. And finally, the last opportunity, or the last thing that I'll say on this morning, is LB 395 does not level the playing field, because it allows communities to adopt a more restrictive ban than this bill. If that happens, you still have the same potential problems that you have now with the communities surrounding Lincoln and Omaha. I've got an amendment that will address that issue, that says that this is the statewide standard. Like it or not, if this is about leveling the playing field, then level it. Don't have hills and valleys in between. Level the playing field. Thank you, Mr. President.
This bill will be back up again tomorrow as we continue debate on LB 395. Thank you very much.